Our top story this afternoon, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, who ruled Libya for 42 years, has been captured and killed in his hometown of Sirte. Now, all day long, there have been conflicting reports about exactly how this happened, but the very latest is that it was done when a U.S. drone fired a Hellfire missile at Gaddafi's convoy. Now, all day, this picture, captured from a cell phone video, has been shown to people around the world, with rebel fighters claiming victory. Gaddafi's death comes 2 months after Libya's capital, Tripoli, was taken over by those rebels, and 7 months after a United Nations Security Council resolution called for a ceasefire and authorized military intervention to protect civilians. This action was soon taken over by NATO, and that is how involvement in Libya started. But certainly, things began to change, ending, of course, with today's news of Gaddafi's killing. Now let's listen to a speech given by Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin back in April in Denmark, where he essentially lashed out at the changed nature of the mission in Libya and questioned who had the right to make that call. Take a listen.
The coalition said destroying Gaddafi was not their goal. Then why bomb his palaces? Now some officials have claimed that eliminating him was in fact their goal. Who gave them that right? Did he have a fair trial? Returning to the no-fly zone, the bombings are destroying the country's entire infrastructure. When the so-called civilized world uses all its military power against a small country, destroying what's been created by generations, I don't know if that's good.
A lot to talk about here. We want to look deeper now into the history of this and how Gaddafi's relationship with this country has changed. Joining me now for more is Michel Chossudovsky, director of the Center for Research on Globalization. Hey there, Michel. I want to get your take on the relationship between Gaddafi and Western leaders over the last decade. Libya's oil supply has not dried up, but let's talk about what has changed, because as we know, back in 2002, 2003, 2004, even as recently as a few years ago, he was meeting with, U.S. senators, all kinds of people. So what happened here?
Well, this is a very long and complex story. There were certainly divisions within the leadership. But I think the crucial issue which has motivated this war is that Libya has 3.5% of global oil reserves. That's more than double those of the United States of America. It's the largest oil economy in the African continent. It is also the gateway to Central Africa. I think we should understand that this is a war of conquest. It is a war to confiscate oil. It is a war to confiscate the financial assets of the Libyan regime. And it is a war which purports to install some kind of proxy state which will obey orders from Washington. I think that is really the issue. This is a country which has not followed the Washington line. Whether we like Gaddafi or not, certainly the President of the United States is no role model. His speech this afternoon is an absolute, is a pack of lies. He's telling, first of all, the issue of the humanitarian disaster which was created by NATO, with 10,000 strike sorties, multiply that by the number of missiles per plane, and then tell us that there are no civilian casualties. There were thousands of civilian casualties, and the images that you just shown testify the brutal form in which Gaddafi was massacred by these rebel forces, which in fact documented are largely integrated by Al-Qaeda militia.
But, sorry, Michel, let me ask then the flip side of this question. Certainly, I hear what you're saying in terms of the U.S. wanting to have control of that oil reserve, but why now? Certainly, there was plenty of oil there back in 2002 when these mass atrocities, these killings going on in Libya under Gaddafi. Why didn't the U.S. get in then? Why now?
Well, I mean, that question of Gaddafi-related atrocities, I think, is a separate issue. If you go back to what General Wesley Clark stated several years ago, where he discussed the roadmap, the sequencing of countries which would be candidates for military intervention, and that included Syria, Libya, Iran, Iraq, and so on. And Libya was part of that agenda. Libya is part of the military roadmap. It is a country to be conquered and to be bought and to be incorporated under U.S. Influence. And in this regard, it's part of the same extended war. Now, we should understand something which is very important. We now have a war which extends from the Mediterranean right through to Central Asia. So this is a fourth war theater, so to speak. Afghanistan, Iraq, Palestine, and now the coalition is talking about a humanitarian operation which would be directed against Syria.
You know,
the war is part of a broader military agenda.
And when we talk about this global agenda, how the world is being run and by whom, it's not just decisions like what we saw today. Let's talk about Occupy Wall Street. I know you've written about this, and in particular about your concern about how this movement may be defined and by whom. One of the symbols we often see at Occupy Wall Street is this clenched fist. This is an image that has been associated, you know, we keep seeing it in Occupy Wall Street, but this has been associated with movements in Ukraine, Iran, Serbia, Georgia, all kinds of different countries around the world. You can see these examples, just how similar these symbols are. And I know you wrote a little bit about this. Talk to me about, is this just a coincidence?
Well, no, it's not a coincidence. We're shifting subjects, but in fact, the situation in Libya is also related to what's happening back home. We are in the most serious economic, social crisis in world history. And there is a movement, it's a grassroots movement of people in the streets who are committed, I believe, and in solidarity with one another, and know that this system is impoverished them, is leading to mass impoverishment. However, there's something quite disturbing about the Occupy Wall Street movement, is that the leaders are invisible. And there's several organizations involved. There's Adbusters, Anonymous. We see Anonymous, but we don't know who they are. And there's another organization which is called Otpor, which essentially is a Serbian organization, which also goes by the name of Canvas. It was involved in events back in the year 2000, ousting Milosevic, but since then it has created a consultant organization, a consultancy called Canvas, and the clenched fist, which you see, is essentially the symbol of Otpor initially back in Serbia, but it has been used in various colored revolutions. Now, the fact that it is used in the United States, in the Occupy Wall Street, I think has to be examined, because one of the leaders of that organization, Ivan Marovic, was in the United States and was actually addressing the rally in New York.
But Michel, I mean, we have had numerous protesters on our show, and they all want to make clear that the reason that you don't see the leaders is because there are no leaders. They say this is a leaderless movement. What if they're, you know, just speaking the truth, that the reason you don't see any leaders is because there aren't any?
Well, you know, we're under the realm of power politics here. And if change is to be implemented, you need an organization, you need a program, you need a leadership, which maybe eventually will emerge. But we have to look at who is behind the initiative to start with. This initiative didn't emerge overnight, okay? It was the result of very careful planning over months and months and months, establishing the networks and so on. And I suggest that Canvas, in other words, Otpor, was involved as a consulting entity I could see some of the elements of their strategy. And when the whole process went live, then it started mobilizing people at the grassroots. Now compare this movement to the movement in Greece. The movement in Wall Street is, I think, is a very creative movement in that people can express their views. But ultimately, if we want to reverse the tide, we have to question the legitimacy of those, not only in the White House, but also those in Wall Street. And who comes to the support of this endeavor? Very powerful individuals such as Warren Buffett, Al Gore. They said, we're with you. But Warren Buffett and Al Gore are not the solution. They're the problem.
There's other names. There's other names being mentioned as well, Michel. George Soros, of course, another one. That whether or not he's had anything to do with what we've seen so far with Occupy Wall Street, a lot of people predicting that he might step in and help with the funding. Do you think that that could happen?
Well, I can't speculate on what George Soros is going to do in the next in the next few weeks. What I say is that you cannot wage a war against speculators and then ask Wall Street to come and help you to go after Wall Street. It doesn't make sense. Okay?
Michel, we're running out of time, and I want to get in one more question. You were mentioning Greece and what's going on there. A lot of changes. I know the EU summit, there's been some changes in terms of a possible delay. Angela Merkel has just said in terms of making any decisions. Just last question, real briefly, what do you see as happening in the coming days and weeks in terms of Greece and, really the chaos that's happening in that country right now based on their economy?
Well, this is also very difficult to say, but certainly if we draw an analogy between the Occupy Wall Street movement and the movement in Greece, they're very different. One is based on a gathering in the streets of New York and major cities, and the other one is an organized strike, which in effect refuses the policy agenda, which is neoliberalism. It's austerity measures which I impose and so on. And it is through forceful confrontation against the seats of political power which the movement in Greece is taking. So that, but again, this all has its dynamics, and it's very difficult how this is going to evolve. We must look at the causes. The causes of this crisis is the global financial establishment. And Warren Buffett says we're killing them. And he talks about, about the 99%. He says we're killing them. And he acknowledges that. But is he going to change? Are we going to freeze the speculators? Ultimately, if we want to reverse the tide, we have to take far-reaching measures directed against the entrenched roles of these Wall Street speculators, which have enriched themselves in the course of the last few years.
All right, Michel Chossudovsky, when we get you on here, we always like to pick your brain on a wide range of subjects. Michel Chossudovsky is the director of the Center for Research on Globalization. Thanks so much for joining us.